Hey guys, welcome back to Loft Sports. I'm Tyler.
I'm Seth.
Today we're going to be doing a little bit of spring football talk. We got something on our mind. Want to get your guys' opinion.
Right.
There seems to be a consensual argument out there that there's really the Power Five, but within the Power Five, there's really a Big Two.
Right.
And the conferences are not all created equal, which we've seen over the past few years. But I think now more than ever, there's more of a gap.
And of course the two we're really talking about here are the SEC. Shocker, they've only been dominating football since really the mid-2000s, right after the USC and Oklahoma had their little runs there. It's been the SEC. You go back, look at how many teams have been in the top 5, top 10. It's the SEC. We all know that. Second, coming in is the Big Ten when we're talking about this Power 2. And really the Big Ten, I know championships aren't there, but consistent rankings in the top 10, top 15 last 3-4 years, what Ohio State has done. They've kind of carried the conference, of course, but there's a lot of quality teams there in the top 10. And where you look at the Big 12, who this year, they barely had a top 10 team, top 15 team even outside of Oklahoma. And you look at ACC outside of Clemson, there's nothing. There's just this huge gap, and it's really starting to show, and I think there's a lot of reasons why, besides just on the field in recruiting, whether it's TV deals or what the case is. What are your thoughts on it? Like, what causes it?
Well, as far as what causes it, I think it's just overall depth of the conference. When you look at these conferences, if we were going to say, okay, give us the top 10 blue bloods of the sport, there's 4 in the Big Ten. You've got Nebraska, since 1970, has to be in your conversation. They've won national championships. They've had the winning records.
5th most wins all time.
Yeah, I mean, they're top 5 wins.
Yep.
All the stats that matter are there.
Correct.
Penn State has to be in that conversation. And then obviously Michigan and Ohio State. Of course, Ohio State.
Yep.
Whereas the SEC... Yes, there's more modern powers in there with LSU, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, etc.
Yep.
But really, in the other conferences, yes, the Big 12 is all about Oklahoma and Texas.
Oklahoma and Texas.
Texas is not where they are. They should be. They've been very, very average. That's brought that level of play down in that league. And then the Pac-12. USC is very inconsistent, and although Oregon and Washington have recently elevated their
Utah
play
a little bit
for 1 year, I'm not going to include Utah in there, but Washington's going to go like this now that Chris Peterson's gone. So it's really just Oregon and USC, and I don't think the balance is there because when one's good, the other's not.
Right.
And you really need a couple of teams to carry it, and then the ACC. Yes, Clemson is a dominant program right now, but Miami, Florida State.
Miami's an absolute
dumpster fire. Virginia Tech has not been the same since Frank Beamer left. So I think it's just an overall depth, the quality.
Honestly, if it wasn't for Clemson, the AAC, the American Athletic, might be a better conference.
I think the American is very underrated as a league. It has Navy, SMU is good, Memphis has been a quality team, Cincinnati is very respectable, and then UCF, USF, they've had good years. The American is not a bad league. It's a mid-major league, but it's not a terrible league.
And they could beat a lot of teams in these lower-level Power 5s, ACC, Pac-12. Now, I'm not saying the American Athletic needs to be considered a Power 5 or anything like that. Not trying to go there with it. I think another big reason, too, why you see such a gap is you look at someone like the Big Ten had their Big Ten network.
Yeah.
The money these schools are being able to provide.
Yeah.
And it's not only just for upgrades. Like you see all the Big Ten schools have recently done a lot of upgrades since the Big Ten network, and the money is shared down. SEC network. The money is shared down. Big 12 doesn't really have a network. They have the Texas network.
Yeah, long
SEC has their network that's sponsored very heavily through ESPN.
The ACC just got one.
So
and the Pac-12,
that could help them. But when I look at it and I see like a Mel Tucker, a guy at Colorado, didn't do anything really in Colorado. Gets hired at Michigan State, kind of a surprise hire. But he's making around $5 million in salary.
Yeah, and they gave him an enormous amount for his staff.
For staff, too. And that's what I'm saying. The SEC and the Big Ten, because I think a lot of it has to do with the networks and the money that they can pull in. You look at the coaches in those conferences, too, and how they stack up against coaches in the other Power 5 conferences. there's a lot of good coaches in those leagues.
There is, and I think, not to say that they don't take football as serious in the other conferences, because they certainly do.
In the Big Ten and the SEC.
The Midwest and the Southeast, college football is the sport. There's a lot of these towns and states, even like Alabama, doesn't have pro sports.
Right.
Nebraska doesn't have pro sports.
No.
It's the main show in town.
It's the only show in town, really. The refs are paid more in these conferences, so you have higher quality of officiating. You have bigger name brands, bigger coaches, better staff. How many times do you see these coordinators get hired off of Michigan, Ohio State, even
Wisconsin,
these SEC,
and they go?
And we're not just talking about the defensive line coach for Nick Saban the last 3 or 4 years is coaching at some other
Colorado State or whatever.
Right. It's you see it all the time. It's not just Alabama. It's guys getting plucked out of kind of middle of the range SEC schools like Kentucky, and Tennessee has had some coaches go on to do things. Georgia even, and they've only really been in the picture last 2 or 3 years. But you look at how many coaches they've had go different places. It's just the trickle down effect from just the power, and I think it all comes down to really the rankings, how much the top 10 matchups matter to viewers. And then the viewers go, they watch them, the money trickles down, they can pay better for better facilities, better coaches. And kids aren't stupid. They want to go play in those conferences that are always on TV and have the better facilities. That's why Oregon gets to stay in the conversation so much, because they're fueled by Phil Knight, of course, who is the founder of Nike, basically funnels their whole athletic funds for all the renovations. I think that's a huge part of it.
Well, I think, too, you touched on it with the coaching. Mississippi and Mississippi State, and I'm not trying to dig here, but they are not top programs in college football, especially even in their own division.
Right.
And look who's their coach. Now they have Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach at two of the worst programs in the SEC.
Because the SEC can pay.
You've got big name coaches where the Big Ten even. Lovie Smith was a very successful coach in the NFL. He's at Illinois.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, now there's other teams that maybe not be able to shell out money even within those conferences, like a Rutgers or somebody like Maryland.
A Northwestern.
Yeah, well, even Northwestern has a pretty good coach, in my opinion,
for what they are. Right, but they don't pay him.
Yeah, they're not going to shell out
They're just
millions.
lucky because Pat Fitzgerald is overqualified for that job.
Whereas in the Big 12 and the Pac-12, you just don't see those coaches outside of Texas and
Oklahoma, the USC, the only blue bloods really.
And Baylor, who has a lot of money because they are a private school. Matt Rule gets Baylor to a top 10 position. They were a game away from the college football playoff. If they beat Oklahoma, they were going to get in because Utah lost. He jumped ship to come to Carolina and coach in the NFL.
And if he was in the Big Ten or the SEC, they would have just paid him to stay.
Probably. Now, some coaches do want to go coach in the pros, so you're not going to keep them. But Baylor is not a destination job. It's just not. So I think that's why you see such a parity. You've got SEC, Big Ten, and then there's such a drop.
There really is. It's almost kind of hard to think of. I think the worst is agree on is the ACC.
Clemson elevates the ACC a little bit, but until Florida State and Miami get back to where they need to be.
It almost doesn't matter. Because USC is one good year away from the Pac-12 really cementing themselves as a third. Texas and TCU are a couple of their normal good years away again for making the Big 12 maybe that third. But you look at the ACC, there's so much more work that needs to be done in that conference. There has to be the bottom feeder, even with Clemson.
I don't know, man. The Pac-12's bowl record the last 2 years has been very, very...
But they've at least had teams in the conversation.
But they haven't been to the playoff either.
I understand that. And the Big 12 can claim that a little bit, but that's just Oklahoma. You take Oklahoma, there are at least multiple teams in the conversation.
Yeah, the Big 12, Kansas State's... Now, they got a new coach. Maybe they can come back up. West Virginia's a dumpster fire. Texas Tech... Iowa State with Matt Campbell, can they keep him there? If not, they're going to go down. Right. Kansas has been the worst team, maybe other than Rutgers, in the last several years.
Yeah.
But Now, who knows with Les Miles? We'll see. But
sure.
There's just so many teams in these other leagues that are just inconsistent. You see Colorado, they're playing for the Pac-12 championship, and then 3 years later, they don't make a bowl game 3 years in a row.
And their coach is getting somehow just taken away and other stuff, too. It's just crazy how the lure of getting out of those conferences for these coaches. No coaches want to actually stay in those conferences unless you're at the conference's blue blood perennial high power jobs. I mean something has to be said for that too, because I think you can out recruit that too. Because I mean you think of guys like really you look at USC's coach Clay Hill. There's no reason he should be there. No. That's so easy to out recruit. You saw it with their recruiting class.
Yeah, it was terrible.
They're normally a top 10, top 15 class every year, and that's a bad year in recruiting for them. They were in the 50s.
Yeah, it's very bad.
Shockingly. So I just think it's more of the movement. And unless some of these other programs we've talked about, the USCs, the Miamis, Florida States, Texas, if they don't step up, this gap is only going to get bigger year by year because the Big Ten's getting better every year. The SEC just added 2 really good coaches into their mix. Now, they probably won't challenge anything, but it just still adds to the profile.
I think
the SEC and the Big Ten are just moving.
I think we're really going to see the last point I'll make. When this playoff inevitably goes to 8 teams, you're going to hear a lot of PO'd fan bases out west and in the Big 12 and the ACC to some degree
teams are going to get left out.
You're going to see 3, maybe even 4 SEC and or Big Ten teams.
Yes.
Because look at last year. Wisconsin had an argument that they would have been in an 18 playoff.
Yep.
You know, Oregon would have been in, but there would have been no other Pac-12 teams.
No.
There would have been Oklahoma, and probably that's it out of the Big 12, whereas you would have had Penn State in the mix, Wisconsin, Ohio State.
Shockingly, Minnesota was a couple wins away from being
they probably wouldn't have got in, but they were out.
I'm saying a couple wins away, a couple games away.
And then Alabama probably gets into an 18 playoff last year with 2 losses. So it's going to be there's going to be a lot of irritated fan bases, but we've got some more. There's some other things I'd like to talk about. 9-game conference schedule. That's another video in its own right.
It's ridiculous what the SEC gets to do.
Well, and the ACC, but we'll talk about that.
For sure.
All right. Thank you guys so much. This is Loft Sports signing off.